Yes, okay, okay. So that was the movie. So we will have now about 1 hour for the discussion, I guess. We have to finish 45 minutes, maybe. We can go on until a quarter to one. Let's wait. Okay. Um, so uh, first, I want to ask a question to Wilfried Huisman, the maker of the movie. Um, I was reading the criticisms of WWF on the movie, and they were saying this movie is inaccurate, misleading, and untruthful. And this morning we heard the introducer of the day. He was talking about greenwashing and green bashing. Without any doubt, some people will say that this movie is going in the direction of green bashing. So, in fact, how did you start to make this movie? How did you you made the plan to make this movie, and what was the objective when you started with it?
I had no plan to make this movie. I always bought every product with the panda logo on it, yogurt, beer, because I had always the feeling if the panda is on it, it must be something good or green. I have some friends working in WWF in Germany, and I think they do a really good job in protecting rivers or the North Sea program I followed up. But then a day came when I did a documentary about the salmon industry. And the biggest player in that area is Marine Harvest in Norway, owned by John Frederickson, a big, big investor. He has 10 billion of money. And one day he decided to buy the salmon industry, not of the world, but he controls 1/3. I saw the disaster in Chile, where they have big farms, and I thought this is an ecological disaster. Tons of chemicals and antibiotics, and then they are predators. They eat fish meal, fish oil. For them, wild fishes are caught and destroyed, worked up to fish meal. And I knew from the watching it that can never be sustainable. And then I followed a little bit the discussion that WWF is negotiating with this big company to improve production, directing to a sustainable production. Now we have an international stewardship on aquaculture, included predators like salmon, but then it all started. And I had a nice interview in Oslo with WWF, the wife who was responsible for this area, Lisa Langard, and the director of a company told me that the salary of this lady is 100% paid by Marina Harvest and not by WWF. And then I had a shock and a feeling that something is wrong. Maybe only in Norway and not in the rest of the world. And that was the starting point to go on a discovery tour through the Green Empire.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe we can give for the first time the floor to Phil Dickey, who is here as a spokesman of the WWF. So I understood that there is a juridical procedure started by the WWF against this movie. So maybe you can explain a little bit why.
Yeah, to a certain extent, because the judicial action is being taken by WWF Germany. I'm from WWF International. But I did want to address the movie in an overall sense. And you know, I think probably the first and most appropriate thing to say is that WWF needs and it welcomes scrutiny. But this isn't scrutiny. This isn't useful. This is not a portrayal of how WWF actually is. And I'm not just speaking as a spokesperson for WWF. I'm also talking in defence of the profession of journalism, because this sort of thing gives journalism a bad name. In the tradition of journalism that I'm used to, you corroborate your sources, you check your facts, you do your background research so that you know the right questions to ask and that you sort of portray things in their right context and in their the way that they occur in the real world. You draw your conclusions from what you find. You don't draw your conclusions and then go out and cherry pick for evidence to fit it. And you don't do things that are ethically questionable, like mistranslating quotes or slipping in questions that weren't there in the original. So if someone tells you that WWF only managed to protect 80 hectares of a 15,000 hectare plantation, you check that. You ring the company. The company would probably tell you that, oh no, it's 4,961 hectares. Now you may not believe the company. You might take it a bit further, which is what journalists normally would do. Say, okay, well, if you say it's 4,961 hectares, show me some maps. Go back to your original source and say, hey, you tell me it's 80 hectares. They say it's 4,961.
But
yeah.
You're giving now one example, while the movie gives more general criticism on the strategy of the WWF. So what about that?
It's a very jaundiced and one-sided view. Bear in mind that you've just had the opportunity to have an hour of a film that is riddled with factual inaccuracies. Some of you have a sheet where we've analysed the film. But from that factual basis is drawn some conclusions that sort of basically paint a picture of a WWF that's in thrall to industry. And we're trying to tell you that that's not the case. WWF works in, we are at the pragmatic rather than the idealistic end of the spectrum of people who are trying to save the world, but we're with you in this. We're also on the side of the angels just as much as you are. And to do that, to achieve our goal of a future where humans live in harmony with nature, then we work with international forums, we work with governments, we work with communities from large cities down to small villages, and we work with business. And we would say that greenwashing is a specific term and a specific danger, but you can't equate it with working for business equals greenwashing.
Okay, so Phil is talking in defense of journalism, but what does a journalist think when a juridical procedure has been started against a movie? What is your reaction on this whole procedure?
I think it's not very interesting to discuss the German juridical discussions because it just started. We had the first meeting with the court, but about the book which followed the film session will be in July. I think these are not the central points of the documentary, touched by maybe some judgments. Maybe this 80-hectare problem will be touched, I'm not sure, because what is high conservation areas? Of course, WWF tries to rescue so-called high conservation areas, but the one I showed as example has a problem that animals cannot survive, so it makes not a big sense. And there are other HCV projects in that plantation, as swamps, for example, or former temples, because one project is enough of HCV to get that certification from Roundtable on responsible soy. So may it be 80 hectares or 2,000 or 4,000, and the community property, the lands of the farmers, is counted as well by the company and WWF as high conservation value protected areas. So we could discuss 2 hours about the mathematics of HCV. It wouldn't help the discussion. We should go to the core problem, and that is dialogue, in my opinion. I know many people and nature conservationists. I have no experience in that. It's for me a new subject. And the first contact was Phil when I started with the film. I went to Glan to see the possibility to cooperate or to dialogue about the problems and to see, to inform the WWF. And there are dialogues, I think, which are very necessary, very useful, which can lead to results, to positive results. But during my trip, Phil, I had the feeling, the growing feeling, that there are some dialogues with very, very big and powerful partners. They are monsters like Cargill. You have a partnership with Cargill since the last year, advising them in sustainable palm oil. I don't know what is sustainable palm oil, because in those plantations, the forest has to disappear if it is sustainable or not. So the fundamental problems are not solved. And these are big companies and monsters which have more budgets than many states in the world. And I doubt that you, as WWF, if you really want it to improve their behavior, that's what you want. And I admit that you really want it, or mostly you want it. And Jason Clay says we want to embrace the 100 biggest player in agribusiness and in energy in the world to improve their behavior. And when we improve them, then all the others will follow. That's a solution. And I think it's an illusion, not a solution. And that's what I want to express in this film. And if this company is a whale, a big whale, you are a very small fish swimming beside, and you can't believe seriously that you can change the course of this monster.
Mm-hmm. So we saw some examples in the movie. For example, the example with the soy fields in Argentina, with the role of Monsanto and other companies. Yeah, the good question is, are you capable of changing these practices of these kind of companies with such a bad name?
Take responsible soy.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll talk about palm oil and responsible soy. And look, I think you have a very valid point. WWF is a large organisation, but it is dwarfed by some of these other organisations. But by and large, we are not in partnerships, and partnership is a fairly formal sort of word. We are not in partnerships with these companies. Our mode of operating on commodity markets is to try and work across the whole supply chain. So we're not working with Cargill, and we're not working with Wilmar, and we're not working with Monsanto. We're trying to, with other NGOs that are concerned about different issues like human rights and things, we're trying to work with them and bring all the other players. And when you're looking at the supply lines, you are talking about the producers, you're talking about the processors, you're talking about the markets. And